And I'll start with Doug on this. What do you see happening in 2013, 2014 with WebRTC?
Well, I think one of the biggest impacts we'll see is actually in the mobile industry. So I'm with D2 Technologies, and we build mobile clients for IMS, VoLTE, and RCS, but also other IP communications technologies, unified communications in the enterprise, but also for mobile service operators as well. So one thing you can think about with the new or recent deployments of voice over LTE and RCS is that you need endpoints to communicate with the IMS infrastructure. And those clients are going to take time to roll out on the mobile devices, and native or embedded devices will take time. But WebRTC presents an opportunity for operators to express these new rich communications capabilities to a plethora of devices, whether it's a desktop, a laptop, or even a mobile devices. I do think it will take time for mobile devices to have a very good WebRTC experience, but that's something that my company and others here at this conference are working on. So I think that's probably one of the biggest areas that from my perspective, we'll see in terms of shifts and impacts.
Gotcha. Hey, Dean, what do you think of this RCS thing, and how's it going to play this? You know, how are we going to compete? You know, or is it a competitive offer?
To be honest, I think that the mobile, or certainly mass market mobile implementation of WebRTC is going to take some time because of, some of the issues we heard this morning, but I think there's a lot of hidden complexity when you start interacting with the radio. I saw a presentation recently which started highlighting the difficulty of what happens if the radio chip in a phone is setting up and tearing down connections to manage both the battery and 3G or 4G radio resource. How does that impact applications running in the browser that expect to have always-on packet connectivity? So I think there's some fairly horrible stuff that's going to have to go on in the plumbing of both the phones and the networks until all of this works perfectly. So I think you'll probably see more impact on perhaps Wi-Fi connected devices, be it smartphones when they're indoors, or tablets, or laptops.
Gotcha. Colin, let's talk about federation, because you guys are probably, you know, you see it more than others, right? So tell me, you know, how is this going to affect the need for federation, or even the word? Is it going to exist?
So, you know, let's think about our various IM systems or email systems that we have inside of corporations. I mean, a lot of those, they federate very well with other enterprises. So from an enterprise point of view that's trying to move things and have some control over their aspect, when they build out these voice systems, they're going to need federation and common identities that they can use between different places to do it. So we're going to see a bunch of that. We're also going to see systems that are just a cloud deployment of a massive over-the-top type system. I mean, probably Trent will talk a little bit more about like hook flashes parts of doing something like that, where they will form the federation. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in that space, and at the same time, we're going to see the enterprises wanting to do that. For the more consumer-based things, I think it'll initially be less federation. It'll be more about taking the large over-the-top deployments of voice and video communications and having a much easier way to deploy them and get users to use them. So you'll see Facebook being able to really easily connect up and do voice and video. Those types of things will be early. I think we'll also see lots of early deployments probably with the call center type environments. This is an area that's initially going to be impacted by wanting to just display an ad and connect back to a call center. But we'll suddenly realize as they start doing more of it that they can do a zillion different things that they never had been able to easily do before and push over telephones out. So I think that'll be,
Gotcha.
That'll be some of the early places. And over time, it'll move what Dean said to into mobile. It's a bit more complicated. And eventually into a whole set of new applications where this is really embedded into things where we never thought of them being communication products before. But what they're trying to do, the actual thing that a person's trying to accomplish, is aided by being able to have voice or video or interactive data with another person.
I think the interactive data is really interesting. And I saw the PubNub demo last night. And
yeah.
I thought it was fascinating that the winner for the awards thing last night was not really about either voice or video, but it was more about real-time data. And if you think of the amount of interest in machine-to-machine and sensors and Yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff that can be done with the same technology. And so it may well be that some of the things that have lower barriers to entry are surprising to a lot of people here.
Trent, let's get you in on this. Federation and identity. Let's kind of, give us a little bit on that.
Yeah, that's a part of great interest to us, and one of the big challenges. As I was thinking, coming up on the panel, no disrespect to present company, but I feel like I'm at a plumbing convention, sort of. And I was happy to hear Dean's reference to plumbing, but if we don't get the plumbing right, a lot of shit will back up. So it's important work. But things like identity and federation, we've been thinking about a lot, and we kind of stumbled onto an interesting identity experience. So we have a peer-to-peer reference client running on an iPad, and we integrated with, as we were building directory, we realized, why the hell are we building directory? We'll go out and leverage a pre-existing directory that happened to be LinkedIn with 160 million business users. And so the early version of the technology we're working with today, I go to a pre-existing self-maintaining directory, I touch your avatar name, and I have direct communication with you. Over the top, free, peer-to-peer, which is really fascinating. And when you begin to deploy WebRTC into the mix, you begin to speculate about what do directory and identity look like, and there's been some great input from other speakers relative to directory and identity, but I think social is most likely to be certainly the consumer identity, and things like WebRTC will enable corporations to leverage pre-existing corporate identity and directory, and enable this whole new regime of direct communication.
Right. Interesting. We didn't hear a lot of. I mean, federation doesn't seem like that's going to be something I need to worry about. Is that fair?
Well, we got a few years of. We've spent the last 5 years in over the top creating these islands and silos, and there's no indication that Skype will open up. In fact, Cullen and I have had some interesting discussions over the past year around the need to move from subscriber-based models. And I've read some interesting editorial around, today we perceive the world as, my business model is I have subscribers who sign up for my service, exist in my directory, pay me a monthly fee. And with things like WebRTC and new peer-to-peer technologies, I don't think that business model that's not the business model we've seen used through the proliferation of other web technologies. I think it may not survive in a direct relationship with WebRTC. There'll be non-subscriber-based models that...
I think subscriptions are interesting and will be around in some contexts. But the idea that a subscription is the only business model is pretty unique to the telecoms industry. Yeah, I've got an account with a local taxi firm in London, which is a bit like a subscription. But I sure as hell doesn't stop me from going out on the street and hailing a cab on a one-off transaction base when I want one, and I don't have to deal with roaming fees when I come to the US, and it doesn't get billed back to my home taxi account. So subscription in that case doesn't work, and I think we'll see the same for a bunch of things around communications, where it'll be free, it'll be freemium, it'll be sponsored, it'll be one-off transactional, it'll be based on a download. There's going to be 100 different ways of paying or not paying for stuff.
I think one of the real technology shifts that's enabling that is this peer-to-peer and this WebRTC is making it so cheap to run really large distributed services that it makes it practical to completely disrupt that subscription based model to something else.
Well, I think it's interesting that all the issues we're talking about with federation are unique to communication service providers or enterprise communication-oriented services. But your point about identity It can be a social identity. It can be LinkedIn. It can be Facebook, Twitter. Any identity out there that's social or non-communication oriented now can have real-time communications added to it. So that's a blended experience. There you don't have federation issues, right? So
you think
Yeah, it kind of overrides the pre-existing federation limitations.
So let's talk about, so how do we traverse that enterprise identity to the consumer identity, if you will? What's your thoughts on enterprises, and how willing are they going to be to open in the door, so to speak?
Well, I think what's driving this for enterprises right now is the over-the-top sorry, not over-the-top, the bring your own device is just terrifying them. I mean, what's happening here is they lost control of the identity. The identity that people is using is not their corporate Active Directory. You know, it's not fluffy@cisco.com. People are using their Facebook identity or their OpenID or their Google+, whatever it is. They already are using their consumer identity for the services they're using and for communicating to other people. And that's really terrifying to the enterprise that's having somebody upload a bunch of data into Dropbox, and when they fire this employee, they can't even get rid of the identity. The identity still persists. So the enterprises, at first, they were very restrictive about this. Oh, we can't solve this, we can't do anything. You have to use your corporate identity. And they've been so restrictive about it, they've painted themselves into a corner where now they have to go deal with federation with consumer identities on the consumer identity type basis. And you see that more and more of them moving to having OAuth IDs.
I mean, I think you probably find, I was having an interesting discussion on Twitter with some people yesterday, and I think that possibly LinkedIn is the sort of the secret sauce for sort of a lot of the enterprise identity, because it's relatively trusted, I would say, and it's also relatively monopoly. Yeah.
Would you go have a chat with them, please, Dean?
Quite difficult.
So Dean, I downloaded this app called Hook Flash on my iPad, and I instantly had all my friends right off from LinkedIn there and work, right, with no entering anything. And I thought, somebody got it right. That's when I started talking to Trent.
We're banging at the doors, telling LinkedIn, listen, we think you're the next generation of global communication service provider.
And I think it's going to be one of those success stories, which is, if in spite of rather than because of the way the actual application works.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry if there's anyone from LinkedIn in the room. But.
Yeah, I spoke to a senior SAP guy in the Valley about a month ago about, and I love the comment Cullen made yesterday around people just want their communications embedded in what they're doing. I mean, hopefully that's where we're going, where regardless of what I'm doing, I can communicate in the modality I want to instantly without thinking, I got to go get a phone and dial a number, I got to log into another service, or I think ultimately communications will just become native to whatever the hell we're doing, and it's there, we use it, it's efficient.
and on any device.
Yeah, across it.
Particularly mobile devices.
Right.
Yeah.
The one interesting part about LinkedIn is that, and I think all of us use it a lot, there's not really, it's a people-oriented thing. You don't see a lot of corporations putting out, say, a customer service interface for LinkedIn.
Not yet,
Yeah,
no.
No? Have you got any feedback from them on that?
My point, so I spoke to the SAP guy and I said, I think that here's the business I'm in. I think you guys will be integrating real-time communications into back-ends like ERP and CRM before very long. What do you think? And he said, Trent, we've always been communications agnostic. And you can understand that. You pick the business you're in and you focus on the important elements of that business. And imagine if I'm a senior SAP executive and suddenly I'm thinking, oh, shit, I don't want to take on what France Telecom or Verizon or AT&T are doing. That's a completely different business. But I also walked away from him and I realized something. I went back to him a moment later and I said, who said they were communications agnostic 6 or 7 years ago? Steve Jobs. In his famous statement around, we'll never be in it. That's the cellular phone business, people's business. And thank God Steve wasn't communications agnostic, because it's made Apple the most successful company in the world. And maybe that's the message that comes out of WebRTC is, it is no longer the best strategy to be communications agnostic. Take this plumbing, let's get it into everything, that regardless of the device, OS, or platform.
And that's fascinating in a way because SAP's, they've got their BCS product. They've got 450 customers on it. The largest has a 10,000 seat call center, and he's still singing a song about agnostics. That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so let's move on to a little bit different topic here. Let's just talk about, and Doug, this is for you. You'll start you out. What do you think is the most overhyped part about WebRTC right now?
Mobile.
That's not
What
self-serving,
took
is
you
it?
so long?
Mobile.
Okay. Any particular elements of that you think that?
Well, obviously, it's key for all of the disruption, the shifts that we're talking about to occur. You need to have the lion's share of the devices there. And having it on all browsers, that's a great start. But it has to be on mobile devices, mobile browsers, and it has to work.
So the ease of use issue, is that part of that, the overhype, or is that not yet there?
I'm thinking more in terms of availability and
Okay.
timescales, that's all. I mean,
Okay.
it will get there. It'll take time, but that's
Gotcha.
probably the biggest concern I have in terms of the hype.
Gotcha. Dean,
Video.
video?
I think there's far too much effort put on video and not enough on voice and the data side we were talking about before. I am just unconvinced that there is going to be a sudden global upsurge of video conferencing beyond what we have today. Yes, it's going to sort of change things around a little bit for people already doing that, but I just don't see that as being, I don't see everyone shifting to video calling all the time. I think it's interesting, it's growing it's growing with some large numbers, but from a very low base, and I think that's overhyped.
Trent?
I completely agree with Dean that video's nice, but it's a distraction relative to what we can really do right now, given where technology is at. If you get a chance, one of America's most brilliant novelists, David Foster Wallace, in one of his books, did about an 80-page diatribe on the ultimate outcome of video conferencing, where people are paying for very expensive masks to always look good in their video interaction. It's just an incredible piece, and it sort of follows video through to maybe its ultimate manifestation. But I'd actually like to ask Cullen, what is your vision of sort of how WebRTC will play out on mobile devices?
So this is a good question. Now I got this whole queue of questions that have been stacked up in my mind here. So I think the most underhyped thing actually is how many different things we're going to be able to do with this that we never imagined. I think that's the part that people aren't really capturing on, because we are thinking about it like a video. We're thinking about it a phone replacement or a phone call replacement.
Yeah, we have voice.
Yeah.
Actually means telephony.
Right.
We think of it as
Yeah.
is the phone. The web, the browser is the phone.
So when I think about the going to mobile, I mean, I completely agree that this needs to be on the browsers used on the major mobile devices, and that's a big challenge, and lots of things to be done. I do see that as inevitable. It will happen. It's a matter of applying the right force and just getting it to happen. Clearly, the Android devices are working hard to get there. I don't know that there's an exact timeline announced, but it's clearly on their priority list. When we start talking about the Firefox OS devices, it's on their priority list, and the iPhone, we're back to, or the iOS devices, we're back to.
Yep, Mike?
Mike, we're back to lost mics. I'm going to switch. Hey, do you guys? I'm switching to the mic. When we talk about the Apple devices, we're back to no one's really sure what Apple's doing, but Ericsson's Bowser works on mobile devices today, so on iOS devices, so there's evidence that it's possible to solve this problem, very concrete evidence, so I think it will be solved.
I don't know, there may well be someone here. I have not yet either heard from anyone or seen anyone at this event from Qualcomm. because if this isn't going to be accelerated in silicon, it's going to take a long time before Moore's law and battery life gets us to where we need to be. So if there's anyone who wants to self-declare as being from either Qualcomm or Intel or any of their competitors, then that's a good sign. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, so we've got the big hype. Colin, you mentioned underhyped about the things that we're not thinking about. Let's give me some examples, better examples of what we can do that folks just aren't really, that you don't see here in these aisles.
So, unlike Dean, I could care less about video on a thumbprint size screen on my thing. That's useless. It's just abstraction unless it's the first time you've ever met somebody. But if you're talking about real video that's that's large and very consistent with the person being there, it is a very different phone experience. And I mean, we've switched to, most people now just choose on all their calls. They're all video for the people that have those types of devices. Now, obviously those devices are too expensive to be widespread right now, but that's just a matter of Moore's law for them coming down. And so I see that video creates different experiences between people where people are very social. They like interacting with people. And that I think when we talk about things we're not imagining is to go and look at all the applications that are about doing something with somebody else or about another person and think about how can we make those a better experience by really bringing the person right there at the time and having, if this is embedding voice or video or data or whatever it is to improve that experience. That might be gaming. Gaming's never really taken advantage of video between the players in a strong way. That's obviously an opportunity area. There's the healthcare areas. There's a lot of areas. And I think that it's going and looking at all these places where traditionally telecommunications had not been used and thinking about, yeah, but those are still about people interacting with each other. How would that change it or improve it? And is this technology now simple enough that you can really embed it and use it there? I think that's the type of spaces I'm talking about when I say that there's lots of things we're not thinking about.
Okay, I quite like that with things like sort of gaming and new use cases. I think I had in mind more like video calling and video conferencing as sort of traditional video communication.
Yeah, this thing like looking up my nose as I'm talking to my desk.
Nose cam, yeah.
So let's talk about what's boring that might be in that. What are those applications that are so simple that it almost seems obvious, but they could be a game changer? What is there anything out there that's crossed any of your minds?
I mean, isn't that the beauty of this? Nobody knows, right?
Okay.
And I have to just echo some of the comments here. I agree that video is overhyped, and adding the telephone to the browser is overhyped. And what's underhyped, again, just to underline Colin's point here, is that it's not about, WebRTC is not about adding telephony or real-time communications to the browser. It's about adding the browser and the resources and experience of the web to communications and interaction. So I think we, in some ways we were looking at the opportunity backwards. Right. And so that gets to what are these other applications, the context you can share, innovative use cases that we can't even imagine here today.
Trent, any thoughts?
Well, we have early interest from one of the major facilities management groups on the continent relative to being able to leverage these type of technologies to share video of infrastructure and connect with subject matter experts via video. So kind of an interesting field force application. And I can't think of specific examples, but I have this creeping feeling that there will be really interesting machine-to-machine commercial applications because I have incredibly inexpensive microphones, cameras, bandwidth, and browsers that give me that kind of connectivity to do commercial applications. So the really exciting part of it is if we can get buy-in from smart people in a broad variety of verticals and make this easy enough to leverage, much like browsers and the web, I think we'll see historical creativity.
Chris, I do want to add one comment on something I think is overhyped here, which is I worry about the impression we're giving the audience and everyone at this conference about how done this is and when it will be done.
There's still a fair ways to go. I mean, we're talking about the timeline for the various standards. The browsers are coming out with things that the good things are starting to work, right? The easy things and stuff. But all the hard corner cases and the deep dark stuff, there's still a fair amount more work between that's in the browsers. Once it's in the browsers, there's how long it takes them to deploy and stuff. So I do think that, this isn't just, it's not like come April 1st, this is going to work. Everything you ever wanted to do is going to work perfectly and be done, right?
Okay, so let me just use an example, okay? Say I'm a healthcare company. I want to build a patient collaboration tool, and I got $5 million to throw at it, and I'm ready to go. I'll be happy with it next August. Is it there?
I mean, the issue there is going to be their patients that they're dealing with. What browsers do they have? Must they have mobile? If a lot of their
Let's take mobile off the table for a
okay,
second.
but I mean, if a lot of their customers are people
Mobile
who
and
still-
video, by the way, for this particular situation.
But I mean, if they're a healthcare company and they realise that half of their audience is still using IE7, they're not going to really be able to say you must upgrade to Chrome or Firefox now, or else your insurance is invalid. I mean, that's not realistic, and that's not a good customer experience. So I think that it may well be that they will do a trial or a pilot with their more advanced users or more advanced customers. But I don't think they're going to be able to sort of just say, right, we're shifting completely to WebRTC next August.
Oh, no. I see it as a
No, if
it's
you'd
a
ask the
transition
questions
technology.
differently, which is their sales agents, or some large companies' sales agents are all going to use it. There's one where you can say, I'm sorry, everyone's switching to this browser.
Right.
So, I think that's the type of thing that we're going to have to
So
navigate.
pharmaceutical sales.
Yeah, sure.
Good example. Right.
Yeah, insurance salesman with a tablet or something like that, demonstrating things in people's homes. That could be.
Great. Okay, so let's shift to gaming, and this is something I have no insight to. I've been writing software since I was 11. I cannot pick up a game controller. I just can't do it. So Dean, what do you think?
My gut says yes. I don't have any detail.
Okay.
It strikes me as the sort of gaming industry spends lots of money, always looking for something that's a bit new, a bit different, has people who are relatively advanced users, so it ticks all those boxes. But I'll be honest, I'm a telecoms analyst, not a gaming analyst.
Not a
Okay.
gamer.
No. Doug?
I'm a recovering first-person shooter gamer. So.
Well, then you're the perfect candidate for this question.
Well, of course, in that genre of games, there already are many solutions out there with wearing the headset and you're communicating with your teammates or the person you're about to frag. But so that technology is out there. What does WebRTC do to that? Maybe it reduces the friction, like we're talking about with all these other applications, and allows you to do it more easily. The resources are built into the system, meaning in the browser, since everything will have a browser, and eventually mobile will get there as well. So I think technologically it will help bring down barriers and enable a trend or something, features and functionality that's
Have
already
your
there.
face as an avatar.
Do you envision it changing or adding a feature to a game that might not exist today? Is there any opportunity for that? Or is it just leveraging the existing infrastructure and repeating
So
it?
I think that this helps bring particularly the first-person shooter type games, a lot of those types of things, into the browser. It really opens up the possibility of those. I mean, if you play browser-based games or Flash-based games today, they're pretty sad from my point of view, though my teenage daughter thinks they're great. She plays them all the time. So things vary, and the number of people who play Farmville, I'm just like, I don't get, right? It's got to be the worst game ever. But it's not. Economically, it's been a wonderful game. This is not going to help Farmville. It'll be just as good or bad as it always was.
Exactly. There's going to be something like that is probably casual games. I don't know, you have two people who have to dance the same way or do a virtual tango rather than a real one because they're separated. I don't know. It's going to be something like that.
The ability to take video of you as the input device and feed that into a game that's web browser based, running with OpenGL, and you interact and have special effects on it. You saw some of the effects people were demoing. I think this is going to take a mid-market of game, not the very dedicated, I downloaded a lot of stuff to my custom-built gaming machine. It doesn't impact those. Those people will still download thick clients. And it doesn't impact the, I'm going to play some goofy flash game. But this middle zone, it's going to totally improve that zone of gaming.
I mean, beyond gaming, there's wider entertainment space. And so it could well be, I don't know, you singing along to something or karaoke in the browser or something like that, or much wider definition of entertainment.
Yeah, the whole second screen technology, where I'm on a tablet or a smartphone as I'm consuming popular entertainment.
Yeah, it's like reality TV. You're not just voting, but you add some words to it as well. So I'm voting for this person, and this is the sentence I think about them. I don't know.
I think we just had a business plan for a new reality TV-based application here for someone who can like execute fast.
Well, let me kind of bring that down a little bit. Say this Alec Baldwin's favorite game, Words with Friends. Do you think it would benefit from having a real-time component to it? I don't play the game, so I don't know.
I would say no, and I'm sitting thinking about the irony of we're enabling voice and video, and the fastest growing communication mode in the world over the last 5 years has been text and IM. And imagine if you measured that across demographics too, because my my children at 21 and 19, I think communicate to me about 99% through Twitter, text. That's their primary mode.
I mean, the issue here is that there's a fundamental psychological disconnect between real-time and multitasking. And whilst we might like real-time for certain tasks, we also like to do lots and lots of things at the same time. And asynchronous communications fits much better with the psychological preference for multitasking.
So the preference would be to, if it starts as text, you still need time to think about a response,
Yeah.
so you want to keep it as text.
I think you may see more like the Skype model of where you sort of escalate to real time when something either occupies your attention or it's your boss that wants to interact with you, so you have to stop doing all the other 17 things that you've been occupied with.
Right.
So I think
Very good point.
I think all of this is going to have to fit in with psychology, and I think if there's one thing which I'm seeing across the whole industry, and one of the reasons why we're seeing the fall of demand for phone calls is people are running busy lives. They are happy to fragment their communications experience into multiple tools for multiple tasks. And so if you think about the phone call, we have one product which is used for everything from calling your client, your best client, to calling your aunt in Australia, to telling your friend which pub you're in. We have the same product for those totally different tasks. And it may well be that we'll see fragmentation there, and some will lend themselves better to a messaging type paradigm. Some are more which are sort of interruptive. If I'm your boss, I have the right to interrupt you when I like. Whereas in other cases that we need something that's a bit more politeness based. And so the demo we saw yesterday where you almost like get told that there's someone in your waiting room who would like to speak to you. I thought that was really interesting.
Messaging is today's ringtone, I think. I mean, if you live in web-centric, session-based, messaging is ringtone to me.
Yeah.
So I think all those things that improve the user experience, fragment it around, this enables a lot of those to happen, and just by reducing the friction, right? And that's one. Totally agree that that'll impact things.
Okay, let's talk about regional and cultural differences. When we started with text messaging, I shouldn't say we. I'd say when the industry introduced it, Europe adopted text messaging far before the U.S. In fact, it took American Idol to change that when people, I think, actually realized. And of course, there was also inter-carrier issues at the time and so on. Are there regional issues or regional cultural issues that are going to change the way we deploy WebRTC around the world? Dean, I'll give you first up on this.
Is perhaps going to be more dependent on mundane things like how other services are priced. If you look at why WhatsApp has taken off in the Netherlands, it's because they had stupid pricing for SMS and lots of smartphones. So it wasn't so much about the Dutch happened to like OTT applications. It was more that it was, worked much better than some fairly transparently silly pricing models that the incumbent operators were sticking to. So I think you do get cultural differences. So in the Middle East, people don't like giving their phone number out. And so having a separate identity That is very attractive. It's one of the reasons that BlackBerry Messenger has been successful. A lot of the world where people don't have monthly subscriptions, but they rely on pay-as-you-go prepay for mobile. There's much more of an attitude of buying things in small chunks or not buying them at all. So you have more price sensitivity. You know, the heaviest users of SMS in the world are in the Philippines, and the heaviest users of Twitter are in Indonesia. And so you may well find, apparently Jakarta is the world's Twitter capital.
Who knew?
Do you speculate as to why, Dean?
No.
Okay.
So I think you will see some cultural issues there. I think the US people have traditionally used phone calls a lot more, which itself might have been because you had flat rate on fixed line for so long. So people have sort of grown up with the idea that you're having a 2-hour phone call is normal. So the culture and the sort of environment are quite entwined.
So it sounds like the carriers have had more impact on adoption than, and whatever strategies they had more impact than anything else.
I think in some cases, yeah. I mean, there are some pluses and minuses, like the identity thing in the Middle East, I thought was an interesting.
Doug, you've got some great insight on mobile carriers. Give some perspective around that. Yeah,
regional differences?
Do you see them?
Yeah, I think it's
They obviously try to manage who uses what, but where do you see this being is it in this country? Is it in Europe? Is it somewhere else where you think this is going to take off first, specifically on mobile?
well, so Dean said it already. It's really about business models.
Okay.
There is a little bit of technology here in terms of deployment of high-speed 4G networks that will come into play. So that's required to enable very good quality video chat, video conferencing. But I think regional differences really are a function of culture and the incumbent operators' business models and current
Do you
plans.
see any particular region attempting to suppress this? Carrier-oriented?
Nothing comes to mind.
needs?
I see some
Okay,
fascinating
good.
things in that, particularly when we're talking about Africa. So a lot of sub-Saharan Africa has awful bandwidth to the point you wouldn't try to do video, for example, right? And text, SMS is very popular there because of that reason. However, how that will change over the next several years is very hard to predict. It might sort of slowly improve like we've seen in other such as happened in the US over a long period of time, or it might very rapidly improve. And why that could change in such a thing is quick ways. There's actually great fiber connectivity all around the coast of Africa now, but there are so many political and infighting arguments between the various regulatory and power structures at a governance level that they can't agree on how they're going to connect to that, pay for it, or charge for that, and then have a large interest in stopping it. So it might be that it very slowly improves and it's hard, or it might be that some countries just go, this is nuts, we're turning it on. And either could happen. So it could be, it's very hard to predict what will happen there, but it will probably either be really bad or really great. It's unlikely to be the middle.
It's going to be driven by the availability of fast internet access.
Yeah.
And so you may find that it gets even more regionalized. It may well be that the capital of Nigeria or somewhere on the coast where the fiber lands has really good connectivity. But if you go to a tier 2 city, they have one fiber, if you're lucky, into the whole city.
Well, I mean, we have that with the
none of
fiber
the
to
cell
Nigeria,
phones.
okay, has great connectivity, but it goes through Benin, and in Benin,
Yeah.
they're not allowed to attach to the fiber because no one can do it, so you're on a 64 kilobit leased line to a satellite uplink, even though it's sitting beside the fiber running to Nigeria through Benin. Right?
Yeah.
So, that's the type of stuff we're going to see.
Amazing. Trent, where do you see money hitting the table right now? I mean, we can see video all around this room, right? Where else besides video do you see money hitting the table with WebRTC?
That's an interesting one. I've been out talking to some bankers in the Valley, and I work with bankers in Canada, and I'm not seeing a lot of recognition and understanding of WebRTC just yet. It's to my surprise, because it's been coming, and it's this massive planet in the center of our universe right now, and but there's been such a plethora of video activity over the course of the last year that I think is that has dominated the interest of of the investment community. And I just don't think there's been enough either interest on their part or work on our part to give them enough comfort to speculate in the future of WebRTC. Yeah, that's a real generalization. There's probably some early, I know we've had a battery ventures analyst out of Boston who's paying close attention. He's working hard at it. But I had some meetings in the Valley a few weeks ago when I referenced WebRTC. There was really, they didn't know what it was. So there's a real mix right now. I think that'll change over the course of the next, I think it'll change over the course of the next 6 months roughly. Partly given the kind of energy I see at this event, the attendance, the credibility of the attendance, that catches attention and disseminates some of the knowledge of maybe there's a hot new thing happening. And ultimately certain kinds of money loves to speculate, and what a great thing to speculate on. So I'd love to think by the time we get to New York in May, or we're here later next year, that there's been a real significant change in money's interest in what this is going to do.
So
Gotcha.
I've been pondering where does the money need to go? Where do investments need to be made? Any insights there?
Hook flash.
What's your address? Where we send checks?
Sorry, Doug. So WebRTC, it's in the browser. It's just there, right? So
Yeah.
So the 4 or 5 guys are working on that, solving that problem. There's some mobility issues on mobile platforms, but then, looking around here, it's applications, it's infrastructure, it's gateway.
I'd love to think there'll be infrastructure guys, there'll be professional services. I mean, I've heard some comments over the course of the few days here from Phil in particular, who's an energetic evangelist for this now. And is it as important as the emergence of browsers? I mean, now, it's not, because we have communications today. But it is important, partly because I think some of the comments you and Dean were making around economics and markets. I'm an economist by education, and what I'm always interested in is when there's technologies that enable you to do something as good or much better for a fraction of the cost. And that's going to be the interesting thing for WebRTC to the marketplace.
I don't know what the history was of when we first started seeing Flash becoming more popular or JavaScript becoming more popular. Where did the money go? Because I've got to believe that that's not a bad starting point for the roadmap going forward.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay, let's talk about adoption for just a minute. And I see 2 different constituencies there. We've and possibly 3. We've got, and the third possible will be carriers. But the first 2 are being consumers and enterprise. Give me some time frames, some thoughts about where you see consumer adoption starting to hit that hockey stick, and where you see enterprise adoption starting to hit that hockey stick.
I think consumer is probably going to have to wait till the mobile is a lot more developed. I think that there is the enterprise. I think because, as Carl mentioned, it's easier for an enterprise to tell its employees what you must have this browser. For example, I think that may well be where you see the early action. But you know what? After seeing some of the demos, I'm prepared to be surprised. It may well be consumer desktop or even internet TVs, or who knows.
Okay. So we've got the mobile is going to affect the consumer. Enterprise can dictate. Colin, what do you think of that?
I think we're going to be surprised by this. I think everyone's predictions are going to turn out to be wrong in ways they didn't imagine. Right? It's hard to explain. So I agree. I think for enterprise, mobile is a very big issue as well. And you're totally right that enterprises can dictate, and that's balanced off that probably the prevalence of Internet Explorer in enterprises is much higher than it is in consumer.
Sure.
And so that's, it's a complicated one to navigate.
This is why I prefer to forecast things that are not going to happen rather than things that are going to happen.
Okay, so what's not going to happen then?
Right, so what's not going to happen? Well, I certainly don't think enterprise mobile WebRTC is going to be a while, because that's where you've got bring your own device coming in, especially. And so there's so much going on in that area that plus the innate conservatism.
So let's distinguish between mobile phones and tablets. Give me Wi-Fi versus public network access. Give me some thoughts on that.
Give me a second.
Let me give you one thought about that. This is a test experiment for everyone to try as they leave this conference center. You're in the center of Silicon Valley, okay? Drive from this conference center to Cisco or your favorite company in San Jose with one phone, trying to keep a phone call up with your favorite 3G carrier, and the other phone running Skype, okay? Your odds with Skype are much higher to get from here to San Jose without dropping the call. And,
Really?
Yeah, the battery life will go down faster, no question about it.
I'm just really interested that that's true.
Yeah.
And is that because it's running, that would be on LTE at 700 megahertz with better coverage, or I don't know?
Who knows? It's in rush hour, goes up, down, and switches to other things. It's IP. The applications don't have to worry about it as much, and the glitches just get patched over with various ways, and that's been a lot of the approach to voice over IP. Plus, the current cell phones have trained us to accept a really low quality, which has really made it easier for voice over IP. But I think that...
Try doing that in London. Try doing that on London on a large operator with colour red associated with it, and you're not going to get very far.
Fair enough. So this is a regional variation again, right?
But it's an interesting comment, because if you take a look at, let's go back to the enterprise and mobile discussion, being, mobile's not going to happen. But if I've got this, and it's Wi-Fi enabled, I'm on a campus, I'm in. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. I thought there was a presenter this morning who said, home Wi-Fi or perhaps good public Wi-Fi is almost like the optimum for WebRTC. So I think that almost like working backwards from that of like, what are the use cases of things that are going to be done in places with good Wi-Fi? And so there's going to be some stuff in the home, and there's going to be stuff in the workplace with good corporate Wi-Fi, but for field force, I think it's going to be a bit ropey because it's variable connectivity.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've got an opportunity here for a few more minutes. Let's see if we've got some questions that you might be interested in. Right up here in the middle. Speak up, please.
Anybody have any use case scenarios in healthcare,
Anybody have any use case scenarios for healthcare or
education?
I've actually published a couple of use cases, but I'll let these gentlemen kind of take it from there.
I'll say go for it, Chris. Yeah, if you've got some use cases.
It's stcblog.com, so I've got them out there. Let's take another question, right over here.
what about net neutrality? If WebRTC really takes off, isn't it going to give the carriers, especially the mobile ones, a real incentive to dial back the performance of the web over the mobile?
Doug, let's have you take that first.
That's a challenging question. Yeah, it gets to the whole notion of best effort versus classes of service for things like emergency calling and other regulatory issues, and it's very difficult to get my arms around that and comment substantively on that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, a big question, and it really speaks to the importance of the regulatory environment. I mean, we all have an opportunity to leverage these kind of technologies to enjoy better, less expensive communications. So, are we really going to be hindered by legacy oligopolies? We can't afford to be. you know, they will ultimately either be, I think there's the challenge that I see with the entrenched telecom industry is, you know, often they'll retreat to their heels when they're best positioned to participate in a massive growth opportunity. And you know, if the carriers take the right view of this thing, I think they can move into, granted their existing subscription business will sunset, but I think they have an opportunity to participate in one of the great growth economies in history as well, as we step up enhanced wireless broadband services and Wi-Fi infrastructure, last mile infrastructure to support the Wi-Fi infrastructure. Who's going to do that? And who's going to get paid to do that? The carriers. And it's new over-the-top players and development people like the people in this room will then add value on top of that infrastructure. And if we get hamstrung trying to lock up that infrastructure that's going to need to grow exponentially over the next decade, we're spinning our wheels in a really shameful way.
So right now, the over-the-top sort of telephony people are a real problem for the major carriers. But if you look around this room, you will meet several of the carriers are here and have been deeply involved with this. And I think that they see an opportunity to not be the carrier that's abusing their users, but be the carrier that's giving the users what they want and creating a business model around that. And this opens up a new opportunity for them to get connected up in the right way that they can create a business model that works for them and still allows this type of thing to happen. And I think that that's what we'll see the innovative carriers do in this space. I think it's a huge opportunity for them. Of course, it's also a threat, but I think the threat has already happened to them,
Yes.
and the opportunity is here.
Yeah, I mean, what I said yesterday was the talk I gave was that this makes the threats worse and the opportunities better. Virtually every carrier on the planet has its own OTT business. Some, like T-Mobile, have 5 or more voice over IP initiatives going on. Telefonica has ToMe and a bunch of others. And I get asked requests from everywhere from Asia to the Middle East to US about this. It's an area I've got a database of over 100 examples of telcos rolling their own OTT initiatives. So, you know, there's a certain amount of hypocrisy management that's going to have to be done there, because on one hand they're lobbying for net neutrality, and on the other hand they are attempting to exploit neutral networks. It's going to vary very much by country. So some countries have hard net neutrality laws. Chile, Netherlands, I think Israel. US is fairly hard net neutrality, but is subject to legal review. Europe tends to be, unless anyone actually complains about it, you can sort of do what you like as long as it's transparent and there's plenty of competition. And then we don't know what the ITU is going to decide in Dubai next month as well. So it does vary depending where you are in the world. You go to Dubai, on the other hand, or UAE, and they block voice over IP because they've got 2 telcos that are still partly state-owned. One of the strategy directors said to me a month ago, we have 2 exports from the UAE, oil and telephone minutes. And we make lots of money on that. So we're quite loath to have, and we've got lots of expats. We have 80% of people living here are not nationals. So yeah, it's going to vary depending where you are in the world. There's also a question which we don't know, which is how well the DPI boxes and so forth in carrier networks are going to be able to distinguish or policy manage WebRTC. And that's a question which I think we won't know about for a little while yet.
Okay, let's take one more question. Let's take it from over here. There you go.
Just wondering if you guys can speak to how WebRTC might influence the small and medium business market. We talked about consumers and the enterprise. I'm just wondering if there's anything that's unique in terms of how that might play out.
Okay, this is a question about the SMB market or small medium business. And Colin, I'm going to give you this one. Start off.
So, I mean, I think this is going to be huge to that marketplace. That's a place that was willing to trade off functionality. They wanted convenience. They wanted easy to deploy everywhere. They didn't need 10 million variants of transfer that no one had ever heard of, but were critical to possibly deploy a PBX with them. So I think that this will be the space where it goes first. And I think that you'll see lots of the people who are bringing out, I'll call them, cloud-based UC communication systems. They're going to be using this technology and going after that space.
So an alternative carrier network sort of thing. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Well, I think you know, I mean, trying to figure out which one I can use as an example without getting myself in trouble here. Let's talk about.
Well, that's why I put you on the spot, brother.
Yeah, I know, I
I
know.
don't usually worry about that too much.
There have been many systems like Broadsoft in the past that went after a small medium business and provided a key system or PBX-like feature set for people that range from 3 people to 50 people or 200 people, that sort of range. That's a really big portion of the market, and what they want is just to go to some web page, type in their credit card, and get everything they want instantaneously for their whole company, pay $3 a month or whatever it is, very little, and have communications that work. Have a phone number, have voicemail, have IVR, some basic things. And that has been provided by people for a long time, but I think that this technology is just going to totally change that market in making it easier to use, reduce it down, and that pretty much everybody that's providing services in that type of space will have to take on this technology and use it for them to be relevant.
Okay. Let's give a good round. What some great insight we've got here, guys.